Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning back in for another episode. When I started tournament fishing, I had a couple of baits that were absolute staples on the rods that I was throwing. And I've kind of gotten away from them a little bit recently, but it's not because they're not fish catchers. It actually has more to do with the lakes and time of year that I'm fishing. But there is absolutely a time and a place for your small little baby crankbaits. You know, this is something that I feel like we've seen come and go as fads, but the reality is when you talk about throwing really small crankbaits like this guy right here, they generate a ton of bites, they still get a lot of big bites, and there's times and places where I feel like they completely outperform some of your bigger crankbaits. So what I want to do today is kind of go over some of my favorite small crankbaits for you, because for me, it was the step to get into crankbait fishing that I needed. I don't think I would have been as successful had I jumped into throwing bigger, deeper diving crankbaits. Had I not gotten into a bunch of the smaller crankbaits early on in my career. Because I remember throwing a lot of bigger crankbaits and just being completely put off by how they just, you know, they're hard baits to throw physically as well as mentally. Meaning, if you're not generating strikes and you don't have the right places to throw it, crankbaits can be very, very frustrating to use. You know, they get hung up a lot, they snag weeds. They just are baits that, in my opinion, especially your bigger ones, are not necessarily angler friendly. Now, to counter that, your small crankbaits pretty much are the complete opposite. They're easy to use, they're still relatively simple to cast, and because you're generally fishing them in a little bit shallower water, they're just, from a mental standpoint, they're easier to fish because you can almost visually see a lot of what it is that you're fishing, whether it's gravel points or maybe some clusters of rocks, maybe you're banging them off laydowns, things like that. You just have more confidence because you understand how your bait's working, where you're pulling them through, and it's just simpler to use than 20-foot deep diving crankbaits where you're trying to bang it off a ledge or a random stump that's out there. That's my opinion, at least. I feel like the small crankbaits are a great way to get into fishing some of your bigger crankbaits. And this one specifically is one of the ones that really opened the door for me. This is the Rapala RFR4. So it's the Rattlin Fat Wrap 4. It's the little baby one. I really like the parrot color. And for me, this has been an absolute smallmouth machine on a lot of the rivers that I fish around my house. But it was a bait that I could always count on to generate some strikes. Now, this is not necessarily made anymore. Rapala does have their ultralight crank, which is actually almost even a smaller version of it. Very, very similar in shape and size. It's just slightly smaller. But I gotta tell you, this little ultralight crankbait generates a ton of strikes too, and I have a whole pile of them at this point. So that was the bait that kind of really got me into it. From there, I started experimenting with a lot of other baits, and I think there was almost a movement where we started to see a lot of like small square bills that started to come out. Another one that I caught an absolute ton on was the Bomber Square 4A. So this is just a tiny little square bill, but again, it generates a ton of strikes. So you can see it's, you know, on that same kind of size as the RFR. We're talking, these crankbaits that I'm talking about today are like 2 inches or smaller. So they're really very small, compact little baits. And a lot of times, one tip, a lot of times they're not great at casting. And from that standpoint, don't be afraid to throw it on spinning gear. The spinning gear will give you better accuracy, better casting distance, and because you're casting it further, you can get deeper depths out of these baits. Now, having said that, you can still throw it on bait casting gear. I throw them on bait casting gear to this day. I just want to point that out, that you don't have to throw these on bait casting gear. A lot of anglers out there would prefer to throw some of your, you know, the smaller stuff on spinning gear just because of those advantages that I mentioned. Now, as we've gotten kind of progressed into a lot of companies coming out with smaller crankbaits, I've really got some other ones that I really like as well. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see that the Berkley Fritside 5 is on this list. This is one that I've just seen outperform other crankbaits on a routine basis. There are a ton of tournament wins on this bait. Just an absolute killer. That's the Fritside 5. And then another one that's had a lot of really good performance over the years. This is just the KVD 1.0 by Strike King. just a smaller version of the, the KVD square bill lineup. Just a killer one as well. I really like this for banging around like stumps and shallow laydown wood. And along that same line, you've got the Lucky Craft. This is the Silent BDS1. Just again, a really small, little chunky crankbait, but this one works really well for banging off cover as well. I specifically like this one for a lot of different rock types too. Just a great, great little bait. And there are times and places where your little crankbaits really seem to excel. The late summer into your fall period, they can be dynamite. They can be really good in the spring period too, when fish aren't necessarily extremely active. Really good at generating that. If you've got a lot of small forage in your lakes and the fish are keying in on a lot of them little minnows, those pin minnows, and just little shiner type minnows that are schooled up, and they don't want to eat bigger baits, this is a great way to go, because these small profile crankbaits allow you to get reaction strikes from fish that are generally lethargic. And it's kind of that theory of putting if you put a cookie in front of somebody that's not hungry, a lot of times they still eat the cookie because it's in front of their face. And that's how I feel like with these small little crankbaits. But they're a great way to generate strikes when the fishing's tough, and they're a great way to introduce somebody to crankbaits. Like I mentioned earlier, crankbaits are an intimidating bait to use. They're not the easiest bait to use, but when you downsize and go to some of these smaller baits, they actually make crankbait fishing click for a lot of people. That's what happened to me. It was like, oh, I understand how to fish it, how to work it through some of the shallower cover. I can start relating that over to fishing bigger crankbaits deeper. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me know in the comment section, what are your favorite small crankbaits? I'd love to hear from you as well. I'm always putting tackle orders in, trying new stuff. I'll put links to these to Tackle Warehouse, so that if you want to check them out and want to support the channel, great way to do it. So thanks for watching. I appreciate all the support. Stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.